So Jeffrey, as we know, a lot of job postings aren't posting for generalists. Now, that may imply that there's a pressure for, say, experts and no room for generalists. But you have, made a very successful career out of harnessing your um, skills in a generalist way and fitting in. So, um, how does one, without being an expert, fit in, or what are the skills necessary to take your general broad range of skills and make it useful or get that job? Or what do you think about that, if that makes sense?
I think we continue to be a little bit too binary about it, right? So
Okay.
not being an expert doesn't mean you don't have expertise,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think to be very clear about that, the issue that I've had with whenever I've been in a transition period and I've been looking for what my next role is going to be is most people when they post a job description, they're looking to fill a certain box. They're looking either for a replacement for the person who was doing that job before. They were looking, maybe they're looking for something new and maybe they're not sure about what it is that they're looking for, but they have a certain sort of mold that they're looking to fit somebody in because they think that's who's going to be successful in that role. And the problem that I've had, I don't know if you or others have felt like this, is I see a lot of jobs and I'm like, I can do that job.
Right.
I know I could do that job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to look back at my experiences and what my documentation is, whether that's on my CV or my resume or LinkedIn or wherever I post this, my portfolio, you may or may not interpret my ability to be able to do that job. And so I
Right.
think that's where it's a really human piece. I've been most successful getting new jobs through my network, or at least knowing people who can vouch for my ability and my sets of expertise and how I can bring those to bear on a particular problem. And even more so, I've actually relied on my network to help me find those areas where they think I might do really well.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are more mission driven. I'm not particularly mission driven.
Right.
I want to tap into somebody else's mission and have them say, here's a really interesting problem. Let's go figure out how to solve it. And once I think that's a really interesting problem, then I'm going to think a lot about different ways that we might go about pursuing it. And so this idea that people who maybe aren't the most expert lack expertise isn't true, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be able to articulate what are the areas in which you have that expertise.
Okay.
And if you have multiple areas of expertise, now you're somewhere in between an expert and a generalist, right? So if we say one end of the spectrum is an expert who has one area of expertise, and a generalist might be somebody who has multiple areas of expertise, you still need those areas of expertise in order to pursue something. It doesn't mean I'm not good at anything that I do. How do I leverage that, right? So the trick then is how do I represent multiple areas of expertise or multiple areas of interest, multiple areas of experience in a way that somebody who's looking to fit it into a certain mold can make sense of it and can
Mm-hmm.
see how have I done those things and how do I take those skills and map them into a new situation. And that's actually a translation question because it's how do you take your experience, call it by a different name than what you were calling it before, and kind of tell that story and plant that seed so that somebody can see, oh, yeah, well, because they did this thing that was maybe tangential or a little bit peripheral to what we're doing, it's not going to be that big of a hop for them to come over here and do
Yeah.
it this way or do it differently than they've done it before. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to convince somebody
Sure.
that you're capable of doing something that you've never done before because you have that set of skills.
So, what do you think of the idea of the portfolio, or something like that? Or how does one tell their story? First of all, we could talk about portfolios. What do you think about figuring out ways to show those connections and show that range, show the way you combine skills in some sort of website or portfolio? And are there other ways for people to share their story of how they are able to walk between experts?
Yeah. it's a very creative question.
Mhm.
I don't think it's a prescriptive question. I
Sure.
think everybody's going to have their own way of showing themselves and who they are. Some people are going to do it on their GitHub repo. Some
Right.
people are going to, make a website. Other people are going to have maybe a physical portfolio or, their Instagram account, like whatever that thing might be. Um, I have a website that's more of a sandbox. It's more of a place that I can test out ideas. It's more of a place that I can um, link out to other things that I'm interested in or other things that I've made. And the number of times people, even in interviews, reference the things that are on that sandbox, like, oh, because you did this or because you did that sort of project. I think it's incredibly valuable to organize your different sets of expertise in some way that somebody else can digest it, right? So what you're really asking about is how do you represent those multiple expertises
Right.
to somebody else in a way that is going to tell the right story or tell the story that you want to tell.
Right.
So I think, depending on kind of what that end goal is or what that next step really is, um, it is important to have those things linked together in some kind of a structure or framework or story so that when you share all of those different pieces that seem really disparate, that it makes sense to somebody else. Because if it doesn't make sense, they're not going to be able to imagine you doing whatever that next thing is. And so, for me, it has a lot to do with how have I brought data visualization,
Right.
in work? How have I brought, let's say, data collection? How have I supported research? How have I done research? How have I um, tracked things longitudinally? How have I? These are all things that I do now in my current role that I have examples of having done them in other things, and I
Sure.
can show them via portfolio. I can show them via different projects that I've worked on. Um, but it's up to me ultimately at the end of the day to call that out because if
Hmm.
I don't verbalize it, if I don't give words to it, I'm relying on somebody else to make sense of me for me, and you can't do that, right? So you have to be able to make sense of yourself and then share that out to whoever's, maybe trying to fill a certain picture that they have in their mind.
So what do you think of us in the audience, me, people that are, what do you think of the idea of we should always be striving to create a certain identity, say online, that we could keep building on, that kind of shows our arc or trajectory, that's easy to access, easy to understand, that this person is, oh, that you can get a sense of this person. Should we be striving to have that as a part of our web presence?
I think that's one way to do it,
Yeah.
right? So it may not be the way for everybody. I have a
Okay.
pretty low online profile, but I
Hmm.
have, a website that I control. And like I
Right.
said, it's a sandbox. So it's more a place for me to play. And if other people see it and enjoy whatever's there, super. Um, I'm a little bit, I probably don't totally agree with the kind of over curated online presence.
Hmm.
I think you can overdo it, and I think
Yeah.
the pendulum can swing too far one way, where what you get in real life doesn't match the thing that you find online. That's very often the case in a lot of different areas. So
Yeah.
I think what to me and what a lot of people talk about, and I'm not the expert on it at all,
Sure.
is
Sure.
what is that authentic representation of you?
Right.
Like, what's that thing where if somebody looks at it, or they see it, or they explore it, they're
Hmm.
going to say, "Yep, that represents Michael."
Yeah.
Like, there's I've got a sense of who he is and what he does and what his interests are, and it's accurate, and it represents you in the way that you want to be represented. I think that's okay, but I
Yeah.
think it's going to take a different shape and a different form for
I
different people.
I
Yeah.
agree. I think some people that it might that one of the differences might be some people coming into a new profession, new, cold. They
Mhm.
might need a bit more of a presence. Someone like you, people know what your work is from the connections you've already made and people who you've already worked with. They've already have a sense of who Jeffrey is and what he can do. Other people might need a little more help because they are changing careers and they might need a little bit of web presence to show what they can do. So you're right, it is not prescriptive and it's based on individuals, but still, I think it's an interesting thing to consider. You might want to, in the audience, you might want to build out a web presence that shows what you can do if it's something that you're trying to break into, and you need help, all the help you can get.
And you're exactly right. I think when somebody's pivoting, like I love engaging people when they're in that moment of a pivot. So
Hmm.
if you're trying to get into a new domain, a new industry, something like that, I do think you have to do the work
Hmm.
to do that mapping, to do that translation into that target industry, because other people aren't going to do it for you. And
Right,
so, the malleable digital media are really good for doing that. It allows you to have multiple versions or multiple kind of skins that you can put on something
right.
depending on where you're pointed. Um, but I do think, you can't just expect the portfolio or the story that you've told to land you wherever you want to go. You've got to
Sure.
do work to align it properly.